On an ordinary day, Earth was struck by a cosmic force. As it reached the city, a warning message was sent to everyone's devices. They were warned of an invasion by powerful aliens and were ordered to evacuate. But when the monster appeared, the alert stopped and it began destroying the city. Amid the chaos, a man stepped up, while the beast prepared to strike again. This man named Guy boldly declared that he would not be defeated. Despite his defiance, Guy was instantly devoured along with his pride. 10 years earlier, a colossal alien species known as the Eva had descended from space. In mere moments, thousands of them invaded Earth. Humanity's weapons proved futile, and extinction seemed inevitable. However, a mysterious cosmic substance called element was dispersed by the Evas. It granted humanity alpha abilities that became their sole means of fighting back. Today, the elite Hache Academy was established to train teens with powerful alpha abilities to become Earth's strongest defenders. Guy is also a student here. However, he is actually just working part-time here as a janitor. Suddenly, a student mocked Guy for lacking alpha abilities and threw trash at him to clean. In this world, people are ranked by alpha ability levels to ensure quick response to EVA threats. However, Guy never awakened alpha abilities and was labeled unranked. Even so, Guy picked up the trash. He then told the student to dispose of his own trash, and that rank didn't matter. Though he had no intention of yielding to anyone, he was quickly beaten. The A-rank student then warned Guy not to command someone like him. He also claimed to have educated Guy in middle school and now aimed to enforce alpha supremacy by force. But just as he summoned fire in his hand, the flame froze in place. Guy immediately took notice. The student turned in confusion and demanded to know who interfered. A then voice reminded him that alpha abilities are for fighting Evas and not oppressing civilians. They turned to find it was Orin, who's the S-rank Ice Wall Witch in a top Academy elite. The aggressor quickly scoffed and accused her of acting superior. After his departure, Orin approached Guy and picked up the trash. She then sternly reminded him not to defy those of higher rank. As she handed him the can, she reminded him that eliminating lower ranks was allowed in emergencies. After hearing this, Guy quickly grabbed the can and thanked her. However, he reminded her that rank and abilities don't matter because only actions define worth. Following that, he said he'd keep cleaning to support the H students protecting everyone. Puzzled, Orin remarked that he was strange. As Guy went on his way, memories from 8 years ago came flooding back. He recalled his mother comforting him and assuring that worth isn't defined by alpha abilities. She told him worth comes from actions, and he just needed to be useful in his own way. Hearing this, Guy repeated her words until he finally understood. Hence, he decided to give it his best shot with his mother's full support. Unexpectedly, his mother fell ill. The doctor said her body couldn't handle her alpha abilities and there was no treatment. Meanwhile, Guy overheard nurses whispering that he and his mother were worthless for lacking alpha powers. As a result, Guy questions the value of alpha abilities and rankings. Yet he refused to let others define their worth and believed it came from actions, not powers. Back in the present, Guy gave his all in mopping floors, wiping windows, and cleaning toilets. By noon, he had finished the day's work. With that, he even planned to clean outside. Later outside, he saw other students were beginning their practical training. When monsters appeared, the instructor assigned each student a C-class EVA and ordered all B ranks or higher to defeat theirs within a minute. As the EVAs charged, Orin erected her ice wall, while the bully unleashed a mega flare. Together, they stopped their opponents with ease. The other students were amazed and convinced that even S-class enemies would be manageable. Meanwhile, Guy observed silently. After being stunned, he remembered the trash he still needed to throw, but a bright light appeared overhead. The light struck the city, while nearly knocking Guy off his feet and leaving him disoriented. Following that, an emergency announcement sounded throughout the school. They were warned of a nearby EVA attack, and all C rank and above were ordered to intercept. Meanwhile, Guy stared at the massive form of the EVA and wondered what kind of creature it was. Realizing that it was the strongest species, the students screamed in fear for their lives. Seeing this, Orin tried to stop them and urged them to fight together to protect the citizens. Despite her efforts, the students continued running and shouting for help. Suddenly, one of them was grabbed by the EVA. Without remorse, the creature swallowed the student whole, then turned its gaze toward Orin. Shocked, she realized for the first time that EVAs ate people. The EVA then charged at her and revealed a second head emerging from its mouth. Frozen in fear, Orin couldn't move. Just then, someone stepped forward. It was Guy, who quickly threw a bag of leaves at the EVA. After the hit landed, he quickly scooped Orin onto his back to escape. However, the EVA quickly recovered and chased them. Hence, Guy headed straight for the sewer entrance he had previously cleaned and memorized. Seeing the lid close, the EVA was left stunned. In the sewers, Orin asked why a janitor without alpha powers would risk his life, and Guy replied that he just did what he could. Moreover, he thinks that alpha ability is not needed to help people. Hearing this, Orin thanked him sincerely for saving her. Setting that aside, Guy informed her that they would take the sewers to reach the shelter entrance. When they emerged and opened the sewer lid, they finally arrived. But the shelter doors were about to close, so Guy quickly shouted for them to wait and let them in. But the students inside said the shelter was full and told them to try elsewhere. However, they recognized Orin and immediately made room for her. Hearing this, Guy exclaimed that they were finally safe. But unexpectedly, the students pushed him back because he wasn't allowed inside. They recognized him as unranked and said there was no room for someone like him. Confused, Orin quickly shouted that Guy had saved her and pleaded with them to let him in. She even offered her spot to him. With that, she reminded Guy that it's an order and he had to obey. Unfortunately, the ground around them began to shake violently. Hence, a student shouted the strongest Eva had arrived and ordered the door shut. Upon hearing this, Guy clenched his teeth. Without hesitation, he pushed Orin forward, which took her by surprise. Nevertheless, he asserted that worth is defined by deeds and not by rank or alpha abilities. Despite this, Orin attempted to stop him, but the door shut completely, locking him outside. After that, Guy turned to face the Eva. Looking up, he saw it preparing to attack. Nevertheless, he stood his ground and refused to retreat. He struck the Eva and was determined to fight on against a foe top-ranked fighters couldn't beat. Since for him, surrendering would also mean losing his pride. Unexpectedly, the Eva managed to catch him. As he was consumed, he told himself dying to save others was a worthy end, but he realized he was lying to himself when he believed in the value of action. After being bullied too long, he had actually longed for an alpha ability, especially to prove himself to those who had looked down on his mother. But now trapped within the Eva's body, he recognized that his dream was no longer possible, so he just quietly apologized to his mother. Suddenly, a prompt appeared before him. It stated that the activation condition for the alpha ability death had been met. While he's confused, the apex predator ability known as Black Hole was activated. A black hole then materialized and began consuming its target. As the process began, the Eva began to be confused. Not long after, holes started appearing throughout its body. At 20% consumption, the damage became severe. By the time it reached 40% and then 90%, the Eva was almost completely devoured. At 100% consumption, the black hole reconstructs and becomes a glowing green sphere. A large crack eventually formed on the surface of the sphere, which finally broke apart. From within, Guy's fully reconstructed body emerged. Confused, he tried to grasp what happened after being swallowed by the strongest Eva. As he also felt a strange hunger, the prompt confirmed he consumed the strongest Eva and asked if he wanted to use its alpha ability. After feeling hungry, Guy lost consciousness and collapsed to the ground. Shortly after, a black hole manifested in his hand. The nearby sphere was quickly absorbed and vanished from the surroundings. Moments later, Guy slowly opened his eyes upon hearing a voice demanding the return of its body. Confused, he began questioning the voice inside his head. But what appeared before him next was the image of the strongest Eva, which took him by surprise. The Eva then taunted him and demanded to have its body returned. Suddenly, Guy awoke from what seemed like a dream. As he regained his senses, he struggled to believe that he was still alive after being devoured by the strongest Eva. However, his attention was quickly drawn to his hand. At first, he mistook it for a bruise, but an unexpected spirit emerged from it. The spirit then demanded the return of its body. In response, Guy questioned who it was, and the spirit scoffed at his ignorance. The spirit then pointed to its majestic horns and sharp fangs. Then he claims to be the king of Evas, but Guy remained skeptical because the spirit looked completely different. The spirit then insisted it was the same and pointed to the identical horn patterns. Guy saw the resemblance, but he still doubted, so the spirit tried to reveal its true name. But after thinking, he only realized that he couldn't remember it. Frustrated, Guy punched the spirit. He continued to strike it for being the strongest Eva. He also vows to avenge the lives of the students who died, but the spirit called him a fool and reminded him that he had consumed it. As proof, he pointed out that Guy's current body was formed from him. Seeing his confusion, the spirit explained it had devoured Guy, but he was pulled inside, and now Guy carried his scent. The spirit also lamented its reduced form and being able to speak the language of inferior humans. Hearing this, Guy asked if his body was really created from the Eva's remains, to which the spirit repeatedly confirmed. However, Guy suddenly sensed someone approaching and quickly concealed the spirit. Soon after, he noticed papers falling, and Orin, who was obviously shocked, but her expression shifted to relief upon realizing that Guy was awake. At the same time, Guy recognized that she was from Heichi School, and she promptly introduced herself. In response, Guy casually decided to call her by her name despite her status as a high ranker. Moving on, Orin reminded him of his disobedience and warned it wouldn't be tolerated, as protecting citizens was their duty. In response, Guy clarified that he only did what he could in that moment. Unexpectedly, the atmosphere in the room turned cold. He then noticed Orin activating her ability and ordering him to tell the truth. She then asked how he survived and why the strongest Eva vanished a week ago. Shocked to learn that a week had passed, Guy asked if it had really been that long. Orin then confirmed he'd been unconscious in the hospital for a week and showed him the current state of the world. The screen then displayed news of an ongoing investigation into the sudden disappearance of the strongest Eva, but radio interference during the Eva attack disabled all cameras, leaving no footage. However, eyewitnesses reported seeing a lone boy present at the scene, which surprised Guy. Even so, the reporter noted that the details remained unknown. After hearing this, Guy began to suspect that he was the mysterious boy in question. Orin confirmed his suspicion and urged him to explain what happened. She stressed the importance of finding the strongest Eva, which still posed a threat to humanity. As an S rank, she warned his answer might force her to act on duty. When asked for the truth, Guy admitted that he didn't remember much either. Still, he decided to tell her what he knew about the strongest Eva. But before he could, the spirit called him a fool for wanting to speak, and this hurt his head. Noticing his discomfort, Orin asked if he was okay, and he replied it was just a headache. Meanwhile, the spirit warned that revealing he devoured the strongest Eva and was reborn from it would get him killed. Guy then hesitated. Hence, he feared the spirit might be right. However, lying didn't sit well with him. Despite the risk, he told Orin he devoured the strongest Eva and showed the proof, which shocked the spirit. Upon hearing his confession, Orin was visibly stunned. However, Orin said nothing was there and asked what Guy was trying to do. At that moment, Guy realized she couldn't see the spirit or the mark on his hand. Meanwhile, Orin began using her ability to make him answer seriously. However, another Eva appeared, and the spirit quickly sensed its presence. Still, Orin pressed Guy for answers because humanity's survival depended on it. Suddenly, the spirit urged Guy to leave and promised to explain later when he hesitated. Before they could escape, the Eva finally appeared. While Guy was still confused, the spirit said that they were too late. At the same time, Orin activated her ability and formed an ice wall to protect them. While doing so, she noticed that the creature in front of them was also an Eva. Hearing this, Guy asked why it was there, but the spirit insisted he escape. The spirit then explained the Eva was beyond S rank and had tracked his scent. Noticing Guy's confusion, the spirit said most Evas on Earth were ones it had already defeated. However, this one sensed his weakness and came to consume him. So it was now after Guy's body, which left Guy shocked. As the Eva attacked, Orin saw her ice wall, which normally withstands S-rank Eva attacks, begin to break. Soon after, the Eva broke through it. Guy then pushed Orin away and told her to run because the Eva was after him. Surprised, Orin warned him not to underestimate her as an S-rank protector. With that, she used her ability to summon 1,000 ice pillars. Hearing the Eva's pain growl, Orin grew confident and vowed to defeat such Evas repeatedly. However, the Eva managed to dissolve her ice pillars. Shocked, she wondered if the Eva had melted them with heat. Setting that thought aside, the Eva began to retaliate, so Orin quickly ordered Guy to hide behind her. Hearing this, the spirit told Guy that this was his chance. While the Eva's attention was on Orin, they could escape. Unexpectedly, Guy attacked the Eva, and the spirit called him a fool. Orin also saw this and told him to flee since he had no alpha ability. But Guy smiled and said he'd face the Eva since it was after him, and he was just doing his part. As a result, the Eva's focus shifted entirely to Guy. However, this left him wondering what he should do next. Suddenly, he noticed a tree not far away. He decided to climb down there to find an area without people. But the spirit warned he might not survive and reminded him it was still his body. But Guy refused because he had no other choice, which frustrated the spirit. Focusing on his feet, Guy leaped into the sky. While he's on it, he realized he was flying. Amazed, he couldn't help but feel exhilarated. However, he soon began to wonder how he would land. As he started falling, the spirit ordered him to shut up, stay calm, and focus on landing. Guy then concentrated on his leg to steady himself. Following that, he quickly landed on the ground. Initially, he expected pain, but to his surprise, the landing didn't hurt. So he began to wonder why he was unharmed after falling from such a height. Hence, the spirit explained that he had lent in his power. Just then, a sudden explosion interrupted them. Moments later, the Eva approached, so Guy aimed to lead it somewhere empty. While running, the spirit suddenly offered to take over his body to defeat the Eva. But if he refuses, it's easy for their opponent to destroy them all. Hence, he gave Guy the choice to either risk everyone dying, or let the spirit take over his body. Stunned, Guy asked the spirit what he meant by handing over his body. The spirit then said it was his original body, and he could now use it again. Moreover, he had lent Guy power for the jump, and he would have died without it. As the monster chased them, the spirit urged Guy to listen or die. Hearing he had to surrender his body to the Eva, Guy recalled those who had died because of them. So he then refused by saying the spirit might do worse and he hadn't forgotten its wrongdoings. Suddenly, the Eva attacked and almost hit him. Surprised by the Eva's ruthlessness, Guy was reminded by the spirit that it knew the flames wouldn't kill its original body. Unexpectedly, they heard a woman scream, so Guy began to wonder if the people had failed to evacuate in time. While distracted, he didn't notice the Eva charging toward the woman. Nevertheless, he chased after it in an attempt to get its attention. However, the spirit told him to stop wasting time and insisted he surrender his body. Finally, Guy accepted that his body was made from the strongest Eva, so he then charged toward the enemy and punched it. However, nothing happened, so he was left confused about why his attack didn't work. In response, the spirit reminded him that without his will, he was just an ordinary human. Meanwhile, the Eva began to charge up a powerful attack. Seeing this, the spirit urged Guy again to surrender his body to handle the situation. Additionally, he warned that the hospital might be destroyed if they delayed. However, Guy silenced the spirit by squeezing it. Following it, he called him noisy and blamed him for the other Eva's appearance. Nevertheless, Guy chose to use the spirit's power without giving up control. Unexpectedly, the Eva's attack was about to hit them, so the spirit scolded Guy for risking their lives. But Guy responded that would only happen if the spirit refused to lend him power. Besides, he could just kill him to end the greatest threat to humanity, which scared the spirit. Reluctantly, the spirit asked Guy for his right hand and reminded him that it was only this once. After the spirit entered the black hole in Guy's hand, power began to well up from the pit of Guy's stomach. Hence, he decided to launch the energy upward to avoid hitting people or the hospital. After fully releasing the energy from the consumed strongest Eva, Guy hurled it skyward. At the same time, the Eva launched its own attack downward. Their attacks collided and merged. However, the Eva persisted. So Guy was pushed back and asked the spirit if they were both going to die, but the spirit told him not to underestimate him. Suddenly, Guy's power surged again. As a result, the opponent panics. In the end, his energy overpowered the Eva. With that, he managed to hit its body. Seeing this, the woman nearby was left in awe. Soon after defeating the Eva, the limited release ended and Guy returned to normal. Despite that, he was amazed to defeat the Eva in one strike and thought the strongest Eva's power was truly remarkable. However, his vision began to blur and he passed out on the ground. But just in time, Orin arrived and rushed over to him, but she stopped when she saw the corpse of the Eva. She then wondered if it was the same Eva from before and what had happened. She then suspected Guy's involvement but was confused since he had no alpha ability. Somewhere unknown, Guy woke up and wondered where he was as he noticed a pleasant scent. In response, a man greeted him and asked if he would like some tea. After receiving the tea, Guy began questioning the man's identity and the situation. The man then explained they took him in after he was critically injured defeating the Eva. He also added they were in Hashi School's underground VIP shelter with top-tier defenses. After that, he introduced himself as Rio, who's an S-ranker commander and Hashi School's principal. Upon hearing this, Guy exclaimed that he had heard of Rio before. He recalled Rio as the strongest special soldier who defeated the strongest Eva 8 years ago. Rio then added that he was his boss at Hashi School and asked him not to be so casual. Upon hearing this, the spirit realized Rio was dangerous and decided to stay low since he had no chance against him now. Meanwhile, Guy began questioning why they were now in the underground facility, but his attention shifted when he noticed Orin's presence. He immediately felt relieved that she was safe. Like him, Orin responded that she was glad he was safe too. Soon, Guy spotted the girl attacked by the bird Eva earlier. The girl then introduced herself as Senri, who's an A ranker, and quickly thanked him for saving her. Hearing this, Guy realized she had been at the hospital and was also a Hashi School student. But this made him wonder what kind of group he had joined since everyone else was a top ranker. In response, Rio offered to explain everything and invited him to try his homemade snacks. But Guy thought the cute cookies didn't suit Rio's serious look. Nevertheless, he started eating, while Rio got straight to the point. Rio then asked if Guy had absorbed the strongest Eva's elements, which made him spit out his drink. He then immediately asked how Rio knew that, and speculated that Orin might have told them. However, Rio clarified that Orin hadn't said anything, and they had simply been monitoring him. Seeing Guy go silent, Rio explained that element is a mysterious substance Eva has brought from space. It's the Eva's energy source and the origin of alpha abilities, but it can't be detected, and is only faintly sensed by top rankers. However, Senri's rare ability lets her see and analyze elements, which is why she was assigned to monitor Guy. Hearing this, Guy realized helping Senri was no coincidence because they had been testing him all along. Rio also added that the strongest Eva appeared alone in Tokyo 8 years ago and caused massive destruction. It was considered a threat equal to a nuclear warhead, and the recent eagle was mistaken for the same species. Suddenly, Rio moved behind Guy with his sword on his neck. He then declared they must eliminate the threat since it is his duty as the top S ranker. But Guy was startled by this, as Rio had just been sitting nearby. Nevertheless, Ryo regretted missing the last attack, so he vows to personally destroy the strongest Eva. With a sword to his neck, Guy grew nervous, but Orin stepped in, stating that if a second strongest Eva had appeared, a third or fourth might follow. That's why making Guy an ally was humanity's best hope, as he could use the strongest Eva's power. Hearing this, Guy was moved by her words. Ryo then lowered his sword and agreed. He said the strongest Eva might best fight itself, but giving such power to a 15-year-old was risky, so they had to assess him first. Hence, Ryo asked Senri to observe Guy. In response, Senri cheerfully agreed. She then walked over and grabbed Guy's hand. Surprised, Guy asked what she was doing. Senri then excitedly said she found a tiny strongest Eva inside him, and that its element level had dropped to 0 from yesterday. But the spirit watching this muttered about how creepy she seemed. Curious about how things ended up this way, Senri decided to continue observing him. She then removed her eye patch, which revealed her unique other eye. As she looked into Guy, she remarked that humans are like universes, so she wondered what kind of universe she would see inside him. With that, she proceeded to use her celestial observation. Immediately, she was transported to another space where she finally saw inside Guy. The black space represented his body, and the twinkling stars were the elements within him. She then recalled they said he had no alpha ability, but he did have elements, though much fewer than others. Suddenly, she noticed the elements moving. As she observed closer, she realized they were being sucked inward. Witnessing this, she concluded that Guy's alpha ability is a black hole. Suddenly, she also began to be pulled in and tried to escape. However, she could not get away. Hence, she screamed as she was dragged deeper. Afterwards, she was sent to another place and wondered if she had escaped. But she screamed again, after sensing the black hole's pull and doubting anything could survive it. Realizing this alpha ability exceeded human limits, she decided to uncover its true nature. With that, she dove further in. There she noticed a black sphere and wondered what it was. Upon closer inspection, she suspected it was the strongest Eva. The strongest Eva immediately responded to her, surprising her, but it continued planning to devour her. Panicked, she quickly canceled her celestial observation and opened her eyes. Back in reality, she could not believe she was alive. Hearing her screams, Orin checked on her. Meanwhile, Guy wondered if it was over. Ryo then gave Senri tea to calm her, though Orin said water was better. After drinking, Senri finally caught her breath. Ryo then asked about the observation results. Senri revealed that Guy's alpha ability is a black hole. She explained he was absorbing his own elements, and this confirmed he had devoured the strongest Eva. She was also pulled into his black hole, where she saw the strongest Eva imprisoned. Hearing this, Ryo asked about the condition of the strongest Eva. Nervously, Senri replied that it had attacked her. Ryo then quickly placed his sword on Guy's neck. Seeing this, Orin questioned his action. Ryo then explained that what Senri saw reflects Guy's alpha ability and condition. But if the Eva inside him attacks, it could endanger humanity, so they must act first. The spirit then warned Guy that Ryo planned to kill them and offered its power to fight back. Hearing this, Senri warned Ryo that the spirit offered its power to kill them, and this tiny strongest Eva might be its soul. Since when Guy absorbed the strongest Eva, its body was pulled into the black hole while its soul was sealed outside. Ryo then warned that even sealed, the strongest Eva grows more dangerous if the spirit tempts Guy to use its power. Hence, a nuclear warhead tempted by a spirit must not exist. Suddenly, Guy grabbed Ryo's sword and declared he had always lived without an alpha ability. With that, he knew exactly what to do and would not be tempted by such power. But Ryo thought there was no guarantee and swung the sword at Guy. After Guy was hit, the spirit grew angry that his body was hurt. As a result, his power overflows through Guy's body. Senri then quickly told Ryo that S+ rank Eva or higher level elements were swelling up from Guy's body. With that, Ryo concluded Guy was now the strongest Eva and ordered his elimination. Meanwhile, Senri noticed the strongest Eva's star elements were rising fast and might soon break free. However, Ryo assured her not to worry because everything was under his control. With his sword in hand, he leaped into the air to strike Guy down before it was too late. As he swung, the impact triggered a powerful explosion. Seeing this, Senri was amazed by the sword strike powered by star element energy, but she also worried for Guy. Meanwhile, Ryo seemed to notice something unusual. After the smoke dissipated, Guy was still standing and continued to release immense power. Seeing this aura, Ryo was shocked by the sheer star element aura around Guy, visible even without the ability to sense it. Despite this, he rushed forward and struck again. His plan was to overwhelm Guy with superior quantity and quality of attacks. However, he suddenly stopped. He noticed that his sword failed to penetrate Guy, leaving him stunned. Meanwhile, Orin considered stepping in to support Ryo after seeing Guy completely unscathed. But then she remembered the scared look Guy had, which made her hesitate. Meanwhile, Guy raised his right hand, and the spirit began to emerge from the black hole. He teasingly asked Rio if he was truly humanity's strongest. Rio then simply smirked and stepped back. Raising his sword, he declared that he would now go all out. In response, his sword became enveloped in smoke and grew even more powerful. Seeing this, the spirit remarked that things were starting to get interesting. However, Senri sensed danger as the surrounding star element was pulled into Rio's sword. With that, the star element energies of both Rio and Guy began to face off. Alarmed, Orin shouted at Guy to wake up and reminded him of his own words about not being swayed. But Guy remained under its control, and the strongest Eva began to release itself fully. Before going all out, it decided to toy with Rio first. In response, Rio raised his sword to block the incoming attack. The collision between their star elements caused a violent clash. Witnessing this, Orin quickly erected an ice barrier to protect themselves. Unexpectedly, Rio's sword was suddenly cut, leaving him stunned. The strongest Eva then laughed and remarked that the battle had been fun before attempting to devour Rio. Seeing this, Orin and Senri screamed Rio's name in shock. But when the smoke cleared, Rio was still standing completely unharmed. On the other hand, the strongest Eva was confused as everything around him turned dark. Unknown to him, Guy had redirected his attack toward the ceiling instead. Seeing Guy awake again, Rio asked him whether he was the strongest Eva or still Guy. In response, Guy firmly stated that he would never be swayed by something like the strongest Eva. He then said he was still himself, and that Rio knocking him out delayed his return to control. Hearing this, Rio was left speechless. After that, Guy grabbed the strongest Eva. He then scolded it for attacking again. Additionally, he warned it that he would devour it once more if it tried anything. When the spirit looked into Guy's black hole-like eyes, it became afraid. There, he remembered the trauma from being devoured before. Out of fear, it quickly agreed to return and begged Guy not to do such terrible things again. Once the spirit returned, Guy admitted he didn't know how to use the black hole ability but was relieved it left on its own. Meanwhile, Senri announced that Guy's star element dropped to 0, so he's unranked again. Hearing this, Rio laughed and said that it was splendid. He noted that Guy sealed the strongest Eva back inside him and unleashed power without harming anyone. Because of that, Rio approved Guy's special enrollment into Hashi School. However, Guy was confused about what passing in special enrollment meant. Rio explained they had been testing him, as humans needed a power to match the strongest Eva if it returned. But that power needed control, so they tested if Guy could dominate the strongest Eva. After hearing this, Guy realized he was tested all along and was now enrolled despite having no abilities, so he wondered if Rio would test him again, prompting Rio to ask if he was unhappy. But Guy raised his fist and said no. He then declared he would do everything so he would join Hache and fight for everyone. He added that ability or not, he'd help however he could and use any power he gained to contribute. Hearing this, Rio was impressed and warmly welcomed his enrollment. Changing the topic, Rio asked Guy to show him his wound so he could treat it. However, he suddenly paused. He saw that the wound was already healing. Realizing this, Rio understood that a body made from the strongest Eva's flesh was truly dangerous. With that in mind, he called Orin to assign Guy to her class and to take care of him. In response, Orin accepted the task. After that, Rio also asked Senri to transfer to the same class as Guy in order to observe him. Hearing she'd observed the strongest Eva, Senri grew excited despite her earlier shock. Witnessing her reaction, the spirit muttered that this girl was seriously scary. Seeing this, Rio commented that things were about to get interesting and Orin agreed. He then took out his flask and offered her some tea, which she politely refused. Regardless, he drank it himself. Moving on, Rio reminded Orin to eliminate Guy and the strongest Eva if he ever went berserk. Seeing her surprise, he explained he'd handle it himself at present, but she must act if he's away handling high-level Evas. But Orin remembered her experience and felt powerless against the strongest Eva. Rio acknowledged that he knew her ice wall had been broken by it, but with her ice star ability called Europa, she should be able to stop Guy before the strongest Eva is released. He also mentioned that he believed she could have acted earlier, which left her embarrassed. With that, Rio reminded her it was her duty as one of the 10 S-rankers and can't refuse. Hearing this, Orin glanced toward Guy. Looking at him, she remembered how he had saved her life before. Even so, she pushed aside her emotions. She then solemnly vowed to eliminate Guy if the strongest Eva ever went out of control. She also declared that it was not only her duty as an S-ranker, but also her way of repaying the debt she owed him. Satisfied with her resolve, Rio called over to Guy. He then asked if he could feel the power in his hand, but Guy replied that he felt nothing. In response, Rio decided to give the others a mission before Guy officially enrolled at the school. He told them to teach Guy about star elements since he lacked alpha knowledge despite suppressing the strongest Eva. He also reminded them that this mission was critical for the future of humanity, and the girls responded with determination. The next day, Guy finally arrived at the special training ground. But when he reached the location Oren had specified, he was surprised to find that it was a hot spring. With that, he began to wonder if he had come to the wrong place. But suddenly, someone called out and apologized for making him wait. As he looked up, he saw Senri and Oren welcoming him to the training facility called Maruhachi. But he was surprised they had finished bathing and wondered what happened with training. In response, Oren clarified it was part of training and not just relaxing, though he couldn't help but think she looked like she was glowing. Setting that aside, he noticed something. So he then proceeded to ask Senri if her leg was alright. She then explained that Ryo healed it with his alpha ability, and it was just a fracture so it healed fast. Hearing this, Guy was amazed by alpha abilities and thought he had to master his own soon. In response, Senri approached him curiously to investigate his alpha ability. As she greeted the spirit, it immediately called her a perverted eye patch woman. After it went into hiding. Despite that, Senri said she was more interested in the hole in Guy's hand this time. She then asked him not to move so she could examine it, which made Guy slightly wary. Ignoring his hesitation, she touched the black hole and grew visibly excited. After it went in, Guy quickly told her to stop because it tickled. Still excited, Senri told Oren she fit 2 fingers and urged her to try, but Guy told them to stop treating him like a toy. Regardless, Senri began contemplating inserting more fingers, and this made him more furious. Just then, the spirit inside the hole bit her fingers in protest. Furious, it told her not to do such things in its home. Even so, Senri looked pleased and confirmed part of her hypothesis. She then asked if he felt anything when she put her fingers, and he said it just tickled. Hearing this, Senri declared that if he couldn't feel anything else, he wouldn't be able to use his ability. Surprised, Guy quickly asked what she meant while the spirit grinned beside him. Senri said she released star elements into his hand, but he couldn't feel them just as Ryo had warned. Hearing this, Guy finally asked what star elements were and how they differed from alpha abilities. Oren explained that star elements are the essential fuel required to activate alpha abilities. They are cosmic matter brought by the Evas, now widespread on Earth and abundant in living beings. So people naturally absorb star elements through breathing and eating while also emitting small amounts constantly. But the main issue for Guy is that he can't sense star elements, so he can't use his ability. Realizing this, Guy understood that he was in a difficult position. Still, he stayed positive and chose to trust Oren and Senri, which pleased them both. With that, they began his star element training using hot spring water. After it, Senri asked Oren to assess it. In response, Oren began using her ability and infused a large amount of star elements into it. As a result, the water became noticeably concentrated, but this puzzled Guy. Oren then explained that the enhanced spring water could help him sense star elements once he drank it. Senri also urged Guy to drink Oren's spring water, prompting Oren to stop her from saying it weirdly. With that, Senri explained that the hot springs already contained star elements, and they had simply increased the concentration for better effect. Feeling hopeful, Guy expressed his gratitude and prepared to drink the water. However, Oren and Senri's expressions look weird. As soon as he drank, he dropped the ladle and felt a burning sensation in his throat. Senri then revealed that she had forgotten to mention something. She clarified that highly concentrated star elements can be toxic to some individuals. This startled Guy, who believed that information should have been given to him first. But she reminded him that he's transferring to Hashe tomorrow, so he must complete the hot spring training like all other students to increase their capacity. Though caught off guard, Guy accepted the situation. He declared his resolve to overcome the challenge and do his best to contribute once he joins Hatch. Hearing this, the 2 girls showed their support and encouragement. After enduring the burning sensation, a surge of power erupted from within Guy's body. Noticing this, he began to feel an overwhelming energy flowing through each of his veins. With this in mind, he began to speculate that these are the star elements. Witnessing this, the girls confirmed it and congratulated him. After a while, Guy began to notice his surroundings more clearly, so he wondered if there had always been this much star element. For the first time, he could sense star elements in hot spring water and trees. Oren explained that nature is rich in star elements, which is why this place was chosen as Heiche's special training ground. However, Guy noticed the sensation of the star elements suddenly disappearing. Senri then replied that the outcome was expected, leaving him more confused. She then explained that her celestial observation showed his alpha ability absorbing star elements into a black hole inside him. Seeing his confusion, she likened it to pouring water into a leaky bucket where nothing stays in. Hearing this, Guy asked if it meant he would never be able to use his alpha abilities, but the question left both girls silent for a moment. Suddenly, Oren had an idea. She suggested entering the star element-rich spring because a full body contact might trigger something. Senri also agreed that it was a good idea, but this made Guy question whether they were taking his training seriously. They then reassured him that thinking for himself was part of the training and would help him face star elements more directly. But Guy was still skeptical. Later in the water, he still wondered if this was real training or just an excuse to bathe. Meanwhile, the spirit expressed delight by saying that the star elements felt incredibly soothing. He remarked that those without talent must struggle, unlike others who could easily use alpha abilities in such a rich environment. With that, it laughed at Guy's inability to do the same. Annoyed, Guy struck the spirit and told it not to disturb someone who was being serious. Still, he admitted to himself that what the spirit said had some truth. Despite being surrounded by so much star element, he remained unable to do anything. Just then, the sound of flowing water interrupted his thoughts. In response, he immediately pushed away the negative thoughts in his mind. He then declared that his only redeeming quality is his unwillingness to give up easily, so he would do whatever he could. Meanwhile, at the women's bath, Orin was busy scrubbing herself. Suddenly, Senri asked what to do since sensing star elements alone wouldn't let Guy survive at H without alpha abilities. But Orin reminded her that alpha abilities depend on personal perception, so Guy had to face this alone. Senri then acknowledged that everyone's alpha abilities are unique, so teaching Guy her perception would just confuse him. With that, Orin encouraged her to trust that Guy would eventually figure it out. Meanwhile, Guy realized his strategy of drinking lots of spring water failed because star elements didn't build up in him. On top of that, he started to feel dizzy since he was not good with hot water. Suddenly, he noticed something. He scooped water and realized that less star elements remained now. Surprised, he realized that the black hole within him was actively absorbing the star elements. Hence, this made him question why his own ability was uncontrollable. But suddenly, a system window appeared showing star elements exceeding the amount to seal the strongest EVA. This confused him, but it made him wonder if this was the same system from the bird seal incident. The window then asked if he wanted to use the newly available star element jet. In response, he selected yes. As a result, the girls on the other side of the bath felt the ground shake. While Orin wondered what was going on, Senri asked her to look up. They saw a beam of light coming from the direction of the men's bath. Alarmed, they immediately ran over. Upon arriving, they called out to Guy and asked if he was alright. Seeing them, he quickly apologized for startling them. He then explained that a window had suddenly appeared, allowing him to activate an alpha ability. As he nervously laughed, the girls were confused by what he meant. The next day after leaving home, Guy felt excited and looked forward to his time at Heishi School. Suddenly, someone greeted him which caught him off guard. He then saw Senri and Orin who said his uniform suited him, so he greeted them. Unexpectedly, Senri suddenly remarked he looked scrawny without clothes yesterday, which embarrassed him. Still, she didn't forget to check on the grinning spirit. Putting that aside, she asked if he could now use Jet at will after what had happened. The day before, he had been practicing using Jet, but it kept hitting the spirit, which made it furious. Guy then denied it, leading Senri to comment on how strange and mysterious his alpha ability seemed. He then said that the window noted excess star elements, so maybe none remained to release. Hearing this, Orin guessed his ability might absorb star elements nearby even from the women's bath. Because of that, they were unable to do their own training to accumulate star element. Guy then apologized, but Orin said she was joking, which surprised him while she wondered what he thought of her. Letting it go, she stressed it was still good he could sense star elements and use his alpha ability even if limited. With that, she encouraged him to continue getting stronger at Heishi School. Hearing this, he vowed and exclaimed that he looked forward to working with them. But his response made Orin wonder what had gotten into him. He then explained he just wanted to do things right, especially since she had helped him during training. Impressed, she commented that he was already starting to act like a H student. Changing the subject, Guy asked them to go on ahead because he had somewhere to stop by. But this confused Orin, who reminded him that he might end up being late, but he replied confidently that he would make it in time. Upon hearing this, Orin retracted her earlier comment, while Senri said that was typical Guy behavior. At the 8th City Hospital, Guy sat quietly beside his mother. He began expressing his apologies for not being able to visit the past week. Although she remained unresponsive, he proudly showed her his Heishi School uniform and his admission. He also said he'd started using his alpha ability a little and wanted to help others. Despite receiving no reply from her, he reassured her that he would come again. After saying this, he finally left the room. Once he had gone, the room fell into silence. However, the spirit briefly sensed something unusual but dismissed it as imagination. Afterwards, Guy rushed after realizing he was late and that Heishi School had moved to a new building. Arriving at the entrance, he doubted if it was right but knew he'd likely be late. Unexpectedly, he collided with someone, so he immediately offered an apology. But the person actually turned out to be the school bully. The bully then demanded why Guy wore the Heishi School uniform. Recognizing him as Hishi, Guy became concerned upon noticing his bandages, but this remark only agitated Hishi. He accused Guy of mocking him and insisted he didn't need pity. Guy then quickly apologized, but he clarified he wasn't mocking him and was grateful for Hishi's role in fighting the strongest EVA. Hearing about the strongest Eva, Hishi was reminded of the day they planned to exterminate it. He led them in an effort to defeat it and earn recognition. But instead, they had been completely wiped out. While Hishi was still reminiscing, Guy extended his hand. He shared he'd be transferring to Hishi too, and hoped they'd one day fight Avis together. But Hishi slapped his hand away. He activated his ability, declaring they'd never be comrades, and everyone was mocking him. Hence, he intended to burn Guy along with his uniform. Surprised by this, Guy focused his attention on Hishi. Meanwhile, other students noticed the fight starting. Orin then quickly used her authority to push through the crowd. When she finally made it to the front, she was shocked to see Hishi attacking with fire. Upon spotting Guy, she immediately questioned what he was doing on his first day, but her mouth was suddenly shut. Beside her, Senri asked her to wait for a moment. Senri then apologized and suggested they observe the interesting fight first. As they watched, Orin noted Hishi was an A rank with combat experience, but Senri stayed unfazed. She stated that Guy would have to prove his strength eventually to attend Hishi school. Still, Orin couldn't hide her concern for Guy. On the battlefield, Hishi's flames relentlessly chased after Guy, who skillfully dodged each attack. Hishi then mocked him for running and continued hurling fireballs in his direction. As Guy fled, he realized he wouldn't last long since the jet had not responded. Now he was unsure of what to do next. In desperation, he looked down and noticed the hole on his hand. At the same time, Hishi began calling him nimble for being powerless. He then unleashed a powerful mega flare to reduce him to ashes. Reacting quickly, Guy tried to absorb the flames using the black hole. The spirit then instinctively dodged after nearly getting caught. Despite the danger, Guy remained focused on drawing in the flames. However, Hishi's attack struck him directly, and his clothes caught fire. From the crowd, Orin shouted his name in alarm. Meanwhile, other students grew more excited and encouraged Guy to keep fighting. With that, Guy began to wonder why the hole had failed to absorb the flames. The spirit then scolded him for hurting him, but Guy explained that he thought the hole would absorb the star elements. However, the spirit explained that Hishi used star elements as fuel, but the flames weren't made of them. Realizing this, the spirit said Guy couldn't rely on alpha abilities forever or waste countless chances. Hence, he offered to lend Guy his power and to think of it as his own alpha ability. With that, he encouraged Guy to burn everything down because burning humans felt satisfying. Just then, Hishi approached and mocked Guy for still being alive. As Guy appeared trapped, Hishi moved in to finish him off by burning him directly. But this made Guy amused by how badly Hishi wanted to incinerate him. Thinking it was too much, Guy grabbed Hishi's arm. He then declared that in the end, fights are won through sheer determination. Unfazed, Hishi told him to stop resisting and accept defeat, but Guy refused. Standing his ground, he faced the flame head-on. Unexpectedly, his ability suddenly activated. Hishi's flame abruptly went out. Confused, Hishi looked at his hand and wondered why his fire had vanished. Suddenly, the window appeared stating a small amount of star elements was acquired for one-time use, which surprised Guy. Guy then recalled the jet ability, but he hesitated because it was too powerful to use on someone. Meanwhile, Hishi began to question whether the star elements within his body had disappeared. Enraged, he tried to accuse Guy and charged forward. Just as his punch was about to land, Guy raised his hand. A brilliant light burst forth, blasting directly at Hishi. The beam hit him squarely and launched him into the sky. As a result, he was slammed back into the ground and knocked unconscious. From the crowd, Senri cheered loudly as Orin noted Guy had successfully used the jet ability. Meanwhile, nearby students were shocked that A-rank Hishi was defeated and wondered who his opponent was. However, even Guy and the spirit were stunned. With that, Guy questioned why Jet activated on its own without his command. At Hashei's temporary building, the teacher announced a transfer student, so Guy was hurriedly asked to introduce himself. As the students saw him, they recognized him as Hishi's defeater and began whispering. After Guy introduced himself, he also apologized for being late and said he was pleased to meet them. However, the teacher gave him 10 laps to run after fighting and warned the class not to copy him. With that, Senri said Guy was entertained from day one, while Orin was still stunned. Later, Senri greeted Guy while saying his A-rank win and 10-lap punishment made a strong debut. But Guy clarified that after the fight, he was actually called to the principal's office. There, Ryo lectured him, which is why he arrived near noon. However, Orin felt he was lucky not to be expelled for fighting on his first day. With that, she declared she'd watch him closely and freeze him if he caused trouble again. Hearing this, Guy quickly apologized. Changing the topic, Senri said his jet ability was amazing and made her heart skip a beat. She concluded that his alpha ability seemed to have two parts. His first is Black Hole, which absorbs star elements, and the second is Jet, which releases them. She also said real black holes absorb matter and release energy jets, so his ability might be based on that. But Guy was troubled as his alpha ability activated on its own. Suddenly, A man wiping his hand approached Guy and asked if he used to clean the school. Guy confirmed it and asked how the man knew, while also wondering why he kept wiping his hand. The man replied that it's because he admired his hard work cleaning. Embarrassed but grateful, Guy thanked him for noticing. After wiping his hand, the man extended it to Guy and introduced himself as Kana, a B rank. In return, Guy introduced himself and emphasized that he didn't have a rank. However, Kana was surprised Guy had no rank despite his strong ability and assumed he'd be ranked soon. Suddenly, Kana was grabbed by the head. He turned and saw Hishi mocking them for a low ranker and unranked acting like friends. Holding Kana, Hishi sneered and asked when Hachi became a hangout for low-rank trash. But someone suddenly called Hishi lame, so he turned to confront the voice. However, he was hit by a green bolt of energy, which sent him flying through the air and crashing into a window. Shocked, Guy wondered what had just happened. A student stepped forward and called Hishi a hypocrite for losing to an unranked and bullying a low ranker. After calling him a weakling, he accused him of causing Class 1's attack on the strongest Eva that led to their destruction. On top of that, Hishi had been fighting again that very morning. Because of all this, the student declared he was stripping Hishi of his rank. Hearing this, Hishi asked why a second-year S ranker, especially like Ida, was here. In response, Ida kicked him and explained that he was there because the first years were pathetically weak, so babysitting them even under the principal's orders was lame to him. Ida then revealed that while S rankers hunted Evas, Hishi urged Class 1 to fight the strongest Eva, causing their destruction and leaving only weak students. With that, he saw no future for humanity if this was the best they had. But this statement shocked both Guy and Kana. Suddenly, Ida announced a selection exam for all first-year students. Clearly surprised, the students reacted together. Ida further explained they must each hunt 5 A-class or higher Evas, but anyone who failed to meet the quota would have their rank stripped and be expelled. But the class protested, as most were B rankers and hunting 5 stronger A-class Evas seemed impossible. But Ida dismissed their concerns and called them lame for staying weak. Changing the topic, he pointed directly at Guy. He said he'd heard the principal approve Guy's transfer but didn't accept it himself. With that, he accused Guy of suspicion for being at the site where the strongest Eva vanished. On a road, the students could be seen running. Among them was Guy, who exclaimed that he had been running all morning. To his surprise, Senri was casually cheering him on, but she also remarked how hard it was running to the exam site for nearly 3 hours. Hearing this, Guy pointed out that the area was supposed to be a town, but he noticed it was completely run down and deserted. Oren then explained that they were already outside the defense perimeter. Due to Eva invasions, people now lived only in major cities and nearby farms. With Evas on land, sea, and air, travel stopped and star elements disrupted communication, which isolated each city. Kai then said all humans awakened alpha abilities and fought back, but Senri said it was propaganda only high rankers knew was false. Suddenly, Ida shouted at them for dawdling. He announced the exam venue was in sight and ordered them to sprint or face expulsion. Exhausted, Kana and the others responded with a yes. Meanwhile, Guy kept staring at Ida. He recalled accusing him of being linked to the strongest Eva's disappearance and not recognizing his transfer. Though nothing unusual had happened since, Guy worried he might be killed if the truth ever came out. As he pondered this, he realized that Oren and Senri were already ahead of him. Later, after arriving, Guy was all exhausted. Looking around, he commented that the area just looked like a normal forest. Still trying to catch his breath, he was suddenly called by Oren. She praised him for keeping up despite their daily training. In response, he explained that he trained hard to keep up in stamina since he lacked an alpha ability. Hearing this, she thought that it was admirable. However, Ida called everyone to explain the exam, so Guy muttered in disbelief that it was starting so soon. Regardless, Ida explained they must enter the mountain and hunt 5 A-class Evas each. He also warned them that the mountain was full of A-class Evas, and failure meant losing rank and expulsion. But one student protested that most of them were just B rank, and A-class Evas were far stronger. But Ida simply called the student lame and used his ability to swiftly snatch the student's badge. While the student stood in confusion, he finally realized Ida had destroyed his badge and expelled him. Witnessing this, Guy was stunned after not seeing when Ida took the badge due to his speed. Regardless, Ida asked them if they expected weaker Evas to appear just to match their rank, and if they'd learned from the strongest Eva's recent attack. While Guy listened, the spirit was pleased that Ida recognized his true power. Ida then urged them to use their brains and alpha abilities to defeat stronger enemies or die trying. Reluctant at first, the students then steeled themselves and declared they were elite H students who would succeed. Seeing them run, Guy hurried after and was unwilling to be left behind. After they disappeared, Senri and Oren wondered how many would meet the quota, but Oren knew the danger since they had to defeat 5 tank-level A-class Evas, while B rankers were only foot soldiered. Hearing this, Senri said it felt like an impossible game, which prompted Orin to support to prevent needless deaths. However, Ida suddenly ordered them to stay behind for a special exam with him. Hearing this, both girls were shocked and realized their survival was now in doubt. Meanwhile, in the forest, Guy, who had sprinted ahead with determination, now wondered how he was supposed to find 5 A-class Evas in such a vast area. Hearing they were hunting, the spirit excitedly asked Guy to lend his body so they could kill Evas together. But Guy looked at the spirit with suspicion. He then recalled Ryo saying after the duel that his resolve was admirable but punishment wasn't enough. Hence, Ryo ordered him to keep the strongest Eva's secret, as other S-rankers might target Guy for elimination. Thinking of the strongest Eva and nearby S-rankers, Guy realized how many threats surrounded him. With that, he told the spirit he didn't need its power because he'd handle it himself. Hearing this, the spirit offered to help if needed and claimed to be on Guy's side. But Guy thought the spirit's words were far too suspicious. But suddenly, a scream rang out followed by a tremor, which alarmed Guy. Just nearby, a student had been cornered by a massive creature. Seeing it clearly, Guy realized it was an Eva, but it was far larger than he expected. Hence, he concluded that this must be an A-class Eva. Suddenly, the Eva raised its foot and struck the student. Upon closer look, Guy realized the student was Kana. He immediately called out to him, telling him to hang on while he rushed to help. However, he currently had 0 star elements and couldn't use Jet. Given the situation, the only thing he could do was absorb star elements using Black Hole. As he touched the boar, it instantly sensed him. In response, it struck Guy and sent him flying into a tree. Seeing this, Kana immediately blamed himself. Meanwhile, Guy wondered how many bones he'd broken since he'd be dead if not for his body made from the strongest Eva. Suddenly, the spirit mocked him for losing to a weak Eva and urged him to use its power. But Guy simply told it to shut up. He declared that he didn't need its power and would defeat the boar on his own. Hearing this, the spirit let him be but warned it would take over if he blacked out. So Guy then ordered the spirit to be quiet and just watch. As he charged forward, he actually had no solid plan to defeat the boar. Even so, he decided to do what he could and raise his hand. He cast his Jet ability, and to his surprise, it finally activated. He realized he'd absorbed star element from touching the boar earlier. However, when Jet hit the boar, it had no effect at all. With his star elements now depleted, Guy knew the situation was bad. Suddenly, several bubbles appeared and caught the boar's attention. Guy was also surprised to see them. Suddenly, the bubbles flew into the boar's eyes. In response, it charged after them and slammed into a tree. Seeing the opportunity, Kana called out to Guy and urged him to run. Realizing the bubbles had come from Kana, Guy understood the situation and ran toward him. Later, while they were running, Kana finally felt relieved knowing that Guy had escaped safely. He admitted that he was worried about what he would have done if Guy had died because of him. After thanking him, Guy then asked if the Eva from earlier was truly an A-class. Kana confirmed it was based on its size and star element. Hearing this, Guy realized they could have died without the bubbles and asked if it was Kana's alpha ability. Kana explained the bubbles couldn't kill and seemed useless, and he kept wiping his hands because they leaked solution. As Guy listened, he noticed a bubble stuck to his shoulder. However, it wouldn't come off. As his finger got stuck too, Kana began to admit he had no talent for fighting Evas. Meanwhile, Guy noticed the bubbles wouldn't pop and were soaking into his clothes. But Kana continued to explain that he was planning to withdraw. However, Guy told him his alpha ability was amazing and could help defeat the boar. Confused, Kana asked if he had even been listening to him. After a while, they finally managed to escape. Guy then commented that the boar was insanely dangerous, to which Kana agreed. Setting that aside, Guy asked if Kana was really quitting Heishi school. Kana confirmed it because he had no talent. Confused, Guy said Kana got into the school because he was amazing. But Kana showed his hand and said his ability only made sticky bubbles with no combat use. He added that at Heisei, only high destruction abilities like Orens or Hishis were valued. Because of this, his classmates often mocked his weak alpha ability. However, Kana stopped when he noticed Guy playing with the sand. Guy then explained that he was testing how incredible the bubbles actually were, since when stuck to sand, the bubbles made the area solid and fixed, instead of naturally falling apart. So to him, that was amazing and he believed it could be useful in Eva extermination. However, Kana shouted at him to stop and said he already tried his best, but it was useless. Frustrated, he asked why Guy stayed cheerful despite his alpha ability failing. Guy admitted that Kana was right, but he once heard that a person's worth comes from what they do, not what they have. He then asked Kana to team up since he had a plan to beat the boar. For it to work, he needs Kana's power. Hearing this, Kana was stunned. Afterward, Guy returned to face the boar. By then, the bubbles that had gotten into its eyes had already disappeared, but Guy had already accounted for that. With a stone, he threw it at the boar, the stone hit it, and the boar turned around. Seeing this, Guy shouted at it that the prey it had failed to catch earlier had come back. In response, the boar charged at him. While being chased, Guy yelled that the boar was coming, and just as he expected, it was fast. Earlier, Kana had apologized because he wouldn't go with him so as not to be a burden. Regardless, Guy had decided to do what he could. Determined, he led the boar on, but the boar managed to hit him with its tusk. Though injured, Guy stood up again, since he was determined to hang on just a bit longer. However, the boar closed in. Unexpectedly, more bubbles appeared in front of the boar. Its feet got stuck, which enraged it even more. Guy was then amazed that the bubbles had slowed the boar down. Meanwhile, Kana kept showering the area with bubbles. He then shouted to Guy that he was too slow to follow, but he'd help from afar. After seeing Guy like that, he had no choice but to act and hoped he would hold on. Meanwhile, Guy believed he could do it now thanks to Kana's ability slowing the boar. Soon, he spotted a white flag. He then shouted that he finally found the handkerchief marker. Without hesitation, he leaped high into the air. As the boar looked up confused, the ground beneath it creaked and then collapsed. Seeing this, Guy shouted that it had fallen into the pit trap. Wasting no time, he jumped in after it while the boar was now unable to move. He then explained that the pit's adhesive bubbles trapped the boar, leaving it unable to move. He also added that Kana could do a lot like this by using his ability wisely, even without destructive power. With that, he activated his black hole and absorbed the boar's star elements. After finally retrieving enough to use Jet, he activated it immediately. Then using his Jet ability, he directed it on the boar. After that, Guy declared they had defeated an A-class EVA. Unexpectedly, the boar began to glow. It then suddenly disappeared, causing Guy to fall on his buttock. As he felt the pain, he began to wonder what had just happened. Suddenly, he noticed something glowing. Looking at it, he realized it was a jewel-like eye-shaped object. At that moment, Kana came down and asked if he was okay. Guy then said he was fine, but he was sore, and that the boar vanished, leaving only a jewel. Upon seeing the stone, Kana quickly identified it as an element stone. He explained that when Evas die, the star elements in their bodies crystallize and form these stones. He also added that element stones vary by Eva, and the boar's eyes likely held star elements. Hearing this, Guy finally realized Evas become jewels when they die. Kana further explained that element stones are valuable clusters of star elements. They replenish star elements for alpha abilities or crafting powerful weapons. As a result, they're now worth more than any precious metal. Knowing this, the spirit planned to use it to move freely and destroy humanity, so he asked Guy to let him hold it. While grinning, he promised that Guy would not regret it. But Guy hit him and refused to give it up, saying nothing good would come from it. Noticing this, Kana asked if something was wrong, but Guy said he was just talking to himself. Changing the topic, Guy credited Kana for their victory over the boar, but Kana replied it was thanks to Guy and also thanked him. After that, they continued their mission to defeat 9 more Evas to meet the quota. Meanwhile, Ida had just used his ability on Senri. Now he doubted if they were true S or A rankers and questioned the exam's validity. Seeing the two of them down, he doubted they could beat Evas with this training. He then turned to Orin and asked what she was fighting for. He noted that her alpha ability lacked killing intent and asked if she was spineless. Hearing this, Orin recalled Rio's order to kill Guy if he lost control, but Ida continued saying that she would die at this rate, which left her in silence. He then approached Senri and told her to stop embarrassing others. He revealed that he knew she had been hiding her alpha ability. In response, Senri admitted that he had figured it out, but Orin was also shocked by this. Ida then ordered her to prepare because he wouldn't tolerate disrespect. Suddenly, he noticed the moon and realized it was time. Soon after, the students who passed the exam finally arrived and gathered together. Though only 6 of 30 were present, Ida believed some first years were still decent. With that, he asked them to show the element stones for inspection. However, Guy and Kana asked him to wait. Guy immediately took the stones from his pocket and declared they defeated 10 A-class Evas together, so they passed. Upon hearing this, Ida asked if they had cooperated to hunt the Evas. Guy confirmed and explained that they were told to use their heads and alpha abilities. Reluctantly, Ida accepted the explanation. With that, he confirmed 8 passed by defeating 5 A-class Evas, each while the rest would be expelled. In addition, he emphasized that they'd likely die later if they couldn't pass this exam, which made Guy listen closely. Ida then tells them that most first-year Class A was wiped out in the recent invasion after rushing in without a plan, and this left Orin in silence. Following this, Ida said they must face stronger Evas using teamwork and full ability, which the exam was meant to test. Getting to the point, he announced an operation to take down an S-class Eva colony the next morning. But this announcement surprised everyone, including Guy, who looked confused. Ida then explained that Evas were reshaping Earth and multiplying fast, causing civilian deaths, so the colony had to be destroyed urgently. With that, the exam was meant to select participants for the operation, and all who passed would join. Additionally, Orin and Senri would join despite their issues as high rankers with duties. Hearing this, Senri concluded they were doomed once they faced an S-class EVA colony. Regardless, Ida announced the operation for next morning and said he'd fetch the dropouts while others rested. After that, he saw Guy and Kana talking. Looking at Guy, he actually had not expected him to pass. Still, he vowed to use all means and deal with Guy if his true nature surfaced. Inside the bus, Guy couldn't stop thinking they'd reach the Eva colony by morning if he stayed. As he looked around, he saw Orin and Senri, who had already fallen asleep from exhaustion. Setting that aside, he wondered why they were suppressing a colony just a month after the strongest Eva's attack. Just recently, he had been powerless and couldn't even attend school. But now he has friends. Still, this Eva nest colony seemed extremely dangerous. Remembering Rio's warning, Guy knew he couldn't use the strongest Eva's power. With that, he doubted winning with just his jet ability, and if he could still store star elements. While thinking, he remembered his mother's words that worth is shown through actions, so he then began to worry about his mother if he died. Clenching his fist, he questioned what was wrong with him. Noticing Guy trembling, the spirit suddenly came out. He then said he had existed longer than humans could comprehend. He fought many Evas, and saw that those who trembled rarely reached battle. Instead, they would beg for their lives immediately. The spirit then prophesied that Guy would soon rely on his power. As he faded into the hole, he said he looked forward to it. Guy then tried to call him back, but he just proceeded to clench his hand and stayed silent on the bus. Soon after, the bus came to a stop. Upon arrival, Ida immediately ordered everyone to move. Senri followed without hesitation. Alongside her were B-rank students Kana, Yomino, Tada, Ritsu, Ken, Koishi, and Hazel, who is an A rank. After a short walk, they stopped again. Ida then said that the S-class Eva colony was in the cave ahead. He explained the Evas knew they were there but stayed hidden, so they had to be prepared. He then ordered Kana to explain the characteristics of the nest colony. Kana replied that the nest colony was thought to recreate the Eva's home planet. Moreover, it was filled with enemy elements that limited humans to 30% power. Ida then confirmed Kana was right and that he understood well for someone so lame. With that, he stressed that modern weapons, bombing, or burying are useless against Evas. Therefore, only the alpha ability using star elements can take down an Eva. Moving on, he ordered Senri to step forward. Senri then removed her eye patch and noted that an S-class Eva nest would be tough. Still, she thought it would be fun. Using her eye, she activates her celestial observation. With this, she was able to see through the nest. As she looked, she noticed the maze the Avis built and saw the dense star elements made visibility poor. Upon seeing an A-class Avis inside, she called it bipedal ants for their two-legged form. Hearing this, Guy admired Senri's skill, while Kana explained she used star elements to detect beings and terrain. Meanwhile, Senri reported that the maze's layout was becoming clearer. Finally, she also found the S-class boss and called it the mother of the bipedal ants. However, she sensed something wrong when another Eva appeared. It abruptly grabbed one of the ants and began devouring it. Following that, it looked at her as if sensing her presence. Alarmed, she quickly deactivated her ability. She then proceeded to report her findings to Ida. She said this was the nest of an S+ class humanoid Eva that appeared 3 years ago and caused massive damage. But with their current forces, they would be annihilated and must retreat immediately. Hearing this, Guy felt a wave of nervousness. Just like him, the other students were also surprised by the humanoid. However, he wondered what S+ meant since he thought S-class was the highest. Hearing this, Kana asked how he got into Heishi school without knowing that. Nevertheless, he explained combat ranks go from S to F and rankers can defeat Evas of their class. Currently, there are 10 test rankers who can defeat S-class Evas and a limit of human strength. But the humanoid in this nest is an S+ Eva that are beyond S-class. With great power and advanced intelligence, it once took 2 S rankers to barely defeat one. Senri then added that the humanoid was likely breeding and consuming other Evas. Therefore, this place is an S-class Eva farm made by the humanoid, whose power far surpasses many S-class, and they must retreat. Upon hearing this, Ida understood and said he'd give his conclusion based on her analysis. He then declared that the operation would begin immediately, which surprised Guy and Kana. Ida explained that the humanoid grows stronger by absorbing star elements, so they must strike now before it gets worse. Thus, they will defeat the humanoid with their current team. Hearing this, Guy recalled the spirit's prediction that he would rely on his power. Refusing to give in, he slapped himself to snap out of it. Seeing this, the others began to wonder if he had lost his mind. On the other hand, Guy admitted that he was scared to fight too, but he said he would still go and do whatever he could. Since if going now meant helping, he would go and do his best. Hearing this, Orin was stunned at first, but she soon smiled after getting courage from him. With that, she asked Ida to let her take the lead as an S ranker. Hearing this, Ida was pleased and told her to show what a Hashi student is. Without hesitation, Orin moved forward while Guy watched her. Facing the entrance of the cave, she activated her ability. Seeing this, Guy noticed a huge gathering of star elements around her. Following that, Orin then opened her eyes and cast Ice Star. The ability quickly surged into the cave and reached the area where the bipedal ants were located. In an instant, she managed to freeze them and their surroundings. Seeing this, Guy remarked in awe that the cave was completely frozen. But Senri corrected him because it wasn't just the cave, but all the class Evas and enemy elements had stopped. With that, she said Orin's alpha ability truly stops everything that touches its cold air. After knowing this, Guy was amazed by the real strength of an S-ranker. Suddenly, Ida called their attention. He explained that Orin neutralized the enemy elements, which allowed all to use their alpha abilities. He also reminded them that they got 2 S ranks, which are Orin and himself. There's also Senri, who sees through the colony and elite students who passed the exam. Meanwhile, the enemy only had 1 S+ and 1 S-class Eva, so they had the upper hand. With that, he declared that he and Orin would take down the humanoid, while the rest fought the S-class Eva called Mother. After saying this, he encouraged everyone to show the pride of Hashi school students, and everyone agreed. Meanwhile, the humanoid continued devouring weaker Evas. However, it sensed someone coming. While on the way, Ida said they'd evacuate after defeating the humanoid. In response, everyone agreed. Meanwhile, Guy was amazed that the cave and all the Evas were frozen by Orin's ability. At the same time, Senri told Ida the path split ahead and the correct way was left. Following that, she notified them about 4 A-class Evas on the ceiling. As the Evas launched their attack, Tada raised his hand and used Shotgun, which a rapid-fire star element ability. Kushi then used Petrification, which allows her to petrify anything she touches. Ritsu also activated Star Scythe, which forms scythes from star elements. Likewise, Hazel used Explosive Kick, which made her kicks detonate on impact. Meanwhile, Yomino used Water Prison to trap enemies in star element water, while Ken unleashed a rock cannon that hardened his body like stone. Seeing them, Guy was impressed by how quickly the team defeated the A-class Evas. Hence, he felt the urge to improve too, but still wondered how to store star elements. Suddenly, Ida told them to handle the remaining Evas while he and Orin saved energy for the humanoid. However, Ida suspected something was wrong due to the large number of A-class Evas. He then asked Orin if she eliminated the A-class Evas, and she confirmed. Senri also backed her up after confirming it via celestial observation. Knowing this, Ida wondered why they kept appearing and thought the S-class Mother might be spawning them. Suddenly, the cave started shaking. Guy immediately asked if it was an earthquake, but Senri seemed alarmed by something else. Using her celestial observation, she noticed a rock fell and had completely sealed the entrance. Thus, she declared they were trapped as the bedrock blocked the entrance. Suddenly, the ice throughout the cave began to crack and fall toward them. Orin then warned that her ice star in the nest was forcibly cancelled. At the same time, Senri detected intense star elements and confirmed the presence of the humanoid. Seeing it, Kana wondered why the humanoid came from behind at the entrance. Senri then explained the nest was a maze and the humanoid freed frozen Evas to distract them. Ida also added its circle and blocked the entrance. Nevertheless, this confirms the humanoid's advanced intelligence. Hearing this, Tada grew frustrated. He then scolded the humanoid for looking down on them, but when he tried to activate his shotgun ability, nothing came out. In the next moment, his neck was suddenly snapped by the humanoid. Shocked, the others cried out Tada's name in horror. Senri then said that the nest's enemy elements blocked their powers without Ice Star. Nevertheless, Ida urged them to calm down because they could still use powers using the element stones. Upon hearing this, they grabbed their stones and regrouped. Ida then noticed the humanoid hesitating, but Kana suddenly pointed out their limited element stones and asked what to do next. Faced with this, Ida considered another method despite its high star element cost. But before he acted, Guy declared that his ability might work. With that, he activated his black hole ability. As Guy absorbed enemy elements, Ida was shocked and noticed their levels dropped enough for their abilities to return. Immediately, he readied his ability and ordered A-rankers and below to defend Guy from the Evas. That's because they needed Guy to maintain their ability usage. Meanwhile, the humanoid silently observed them. Ignoring this, Ida told Orin to proceed with the plan to defeat the humanoid. After she replied yes, they quickly charged forward. Immediately, Orin activated her ability and cast Ice Wall. The ice then spread across the floor and froze the humanoid's feet in place. With the humanoid immobilized, Ida began gathering his power. Once fully charged, he unleashed a powerful attack and struck the humanoid. As a result, he successfully sliced through its body. Witnessing the damage, Ida believed they could defeat the S-Eva with teamwork. Meanwhile, Ritsu was amazed that Ida's compressed air slash could slice through anything. However, Ida stayed cautious and planned to slice the humanoid further. Unexpectedly, the humanoid laughed in amusement. Without warning, it struck Ida and sent him crashing into a nearby wall. Hence, Orin reacted in shock. Meanwhile, the humanoid's severed arm began to move. Muscle tissues rapidly formed and reconnected the arm to the main body. The lower half of the humanoid also regenerated, which surprised Orin. After its body was connected, the humanoid declared that it was hungry. Hence, it clearly identifies them as its food. Alarmed by its regeneration, Senri ordered a defensive formation. Meanwhile, Guy struggled to maintain Black Hole. Hence, he finally collapsed. Seeing Guy groan in pain, Senri checked his discolored hand from absorbing too many enemy elements. On the other hand, the humanoid moved swiftly and snapped Yomino's neck. In response, Ritsu attempted to activate his star scythe, but his ability failed even with an element stone. As a result, his neck was also snapped. Looking at Ritsu's body, the humanoid casually remarked on his failed grip. It then released an even denser wave of enemy elements, so Senri realized their abilities were fully sealed by the humanoid's enemy elements. In the midst of it, a barrage of ice pillars struck the humanoid from behind. Senri then turned and saw that Orin had launched the attack. Orin then declared mission abort and told others to retreat while she faced the humanoid. But the humanoid just smiled in amusement. Suddenly, a loud sound caught Orin's attention. Emerging from the shadows were multiple A-class EVAs. Seeing this, Ken realized they were surrounded, and Koichi said it was likely due to the ice star melting. The humanoid then appeared satisfied to enjoy its meal. Thus, Hazel began to lose hope. Despite this, Guy still attempted to move, but the EVAs began to advance toward them. Orin then responded by blocking them, but Ritsu was unprotected and was hit. Seeing this, Guy blamed himself for collapsing at the crucial moment. Unexpectedly, one of the EVAs approached them. As the tall EVA stood in front, it attacked Guy and struck him directly on the head. After losing consciousness, Guy soon woke up, and his body was glowing. Looking around, he felt confused, then recognized the place from a recurring dream. Suddenly, a voice told him the prophesied time had come early. Hearing this, Guy recognized it as the strongest EVA. The strongest EVA then told him to observe his situation. Upon looking, Guy saw himself about to be struck and was taken by surprise. In response, the strongest EVA offered to help if Guy gave up control. However, Guy insisted the strongest EVA lend power like before, since both would suffer if he lost. The strongest EVA then clarified that he misunderstood their roles. He emphasized that with Guy's body, he could regenerate from almost any attack. More importantly, he pointed out that Guy clearly cared for the others like Orin, Ritsu, and the rest. So he asked if Guy really thought he hadn't noticed their importance to him. Hearing this, Guy grit his teeth in frustration. Despite the tension, the strongest EVA urged him to admit who was in control and surrender his body. Realizing the stakes, Guy agreed to lend his body, but on one condition. He reminded him how he reclaimed control in the underground shelter. This time, he made clear the deal was temporary and his comrades must not be harmed. The strongest EVA agreed, vowing to keep his word as king of the EVAs. Back in reality, Guy smirked and effortlessly stopped the attack from the EVA. With a single motion, he grabbed its limb and slammed it into the ground. Witnessing this, Orin quickly noticed the presence of star elements. As she suspected, Guy was engulfed in power and made her wonder if the strongest species had been unleashed. Meanwhile, the strongest EVA felt alive once again. For a long time, he had been restricted by Guy's abilities, but now looking at his hand, he wondered how good this body was. Spotting nearby EVAs, he decided to test it. Without hesitation, he unleashed his full power and struck them down with overwhelming force. With that, he remarked on the body's excellent durability. Suddenly, a tall EVA attacked from behind. In response, he turned and delivered a swift kick, which decapitated it. He then concluded that the body's reaction was satisfactory. As more EVAs appeared, he grew bored of their weakness and chose to show true strength. For them to experience it firsthand, he charged toward the swarm. There he struck multiple enemies with his bare hands. In this moment of freedom, he found the experience exhilarating. But deep within his eye, Guy was watching. Inside, Guy struggled against the overwhelming energy. He repeatedly heard the word destroy, echoing in his mind, and wondered if it originated from the strongest EVA. He then recalled Senri saying the black hole split the strongest EVA's soul and body, which sealed its power. Hence, Guy realized the sealed power was returning to the strongest EVA's soul. Suddenly, an alert showed the strongest EVA's release rate had hit 0.002%. Seeing this, he recalled it was just 0.0001% during the bird-type EVA fight. But an urgent warning said if the rate passed 1%, the strongest EVA would be released. In a panic, Guy questioned why it should be at 1%. Outside, the EVAs were easily defeated. Hence, the strongest EVA wondered if the enemy forces were near defeat because they're too weak to be challenging. Suddenly, he spotted the humanoid. Intrigued, he invited it to entertain him because humans had labeled it S+. Upon hearing this, the humanoid immediately recognized the strongest EVA. Meanwhile inside, Guy noticed the orb and realized that a crack had formed on its surface. The strongest Eva then warned that even a fraction of power could let him fully break free if Guy slipped. Upon hearing this, Guy understood that he had been planning this. Determined, he declared that he would take his body back. Looking upward, he saw a hole and remembered using it before to regain control. With that in mind, he moved toward it. However, he was abruptly stopped. Confused, he wondered if he had collided with something. He then tried again, but this time his hand touched something, so he finally noticed the invisible wall. Just then, the system warned that the rising release rate left no room in the body for him to regain control. Shocked, he realized things were getting worse. Outside, the strongest Eva now faced the humanoid. Without hesitation, he invited the humanoid to begin the fight. He noted that it had been long since he had a body and planned to savor it. The humanoid then expressed surprise at meeting the Eva King there, but the strongest Eva noted the humanoid seems happy after speaking Eva language. In response, it agreed while bulking its arm, its legs, and even its back. After that, it declared its intent to devour the strongest Eva and grow even stronger. With the sudden surge of energy, it blinded Senri and the others. With that, she was stunned by the humanoid's ability to absorb star elements for growth. She then concluded humans couldn't defeat this opponent, and not even its rank fighters. Hearing its plan, he found it amusing and called it the perfect time for a deathmatch. Suddenly, the defeated Evas below began to glow. After they vanished, they transformed into stone elements. Wasting no time, the humanoid charged forward, but the strongest Eva braced himself. They both raised their fists and met each other's attack. With that, their punches collided with immense force. The force of the impact echoed throughout the surroundings. As the battle continued, the strongest Eva felt exhilarated. He remarked that a real death match really requires a worthy opponent to be exciting. With that, he eagerly exchanged blows with the humanoid. Watching this, the students worried the cave couldn't hold up against the battle's intensity. Kana then said it was a real plus Eva fight, while Hazel questioned if Guy was always that strong. But Kana recalled Guy's power only absorbed and released star elements. Suddenly, Senri urged retreat, but Orin hesitated. Hence, Senri reminded them that survival and reporting this were the priority. She then told Orin to break the rock blocking the entrance. Using her ability, Orin channeled power into the rock, and it quickly shattered. Finally, the path to the exit was revealed. However, the strongest Eva had no intention of letting them escape. He demanded that they stay and watch the greatest spectacle. Hearing this, Senri grew frustrated. Meanwhile, the humanoid asked if it was really the time to look away. In response, the strongest Eva punched it. Following that, he sent the humanoid flying into the ceiling. Unable to hold back after the surprise attack, he dismissed the humanoid as merely human standard and no match for him. Turning his attention to the students, he vowed to torture them and watch Guy's reaction, and this shocked the girls. Overhearing it, Guy reminded him of his vow not to harm his allies, but he was mocked instead for trusting a promise from one who'd never honor a deal with a human. Stunned, Guy could only shout in frustration. Fueled by desperation, he charged toward the hole. However, the invisible barrier still held him back. Determined, he began pounding it with his bare hands. He also demanded the system to remove the wall to regain his body. But nothing happened. Seeing this, the strongest Eva told him to just watch since he couldn't use his powers properly. Outside, the strongest Eva pondered how to toy with his new playthings. Besides, there's many of them. Clenching his handkerchief, Kana shouted at Guy and begged him to return to normal. But the strongest Eva declared he was the strongest Eva and refused comparison to a weakling like Guy. Hence, this revelation shocked everyone. But Kana didn't believe that Guy was actually the strongest Eva. Using his power, the strongest Eva said anyone tuned to star elements would know no normal human could hold that much. Hence, Kana recognized it as the strongest Eva's energy from the Heiche school attack. Hearing this, the strongest Eva was inspired by a wicked idea. He then vowed to burn them all to ashes like that day. But before he could act, a voice shouted Ice Star. Instantly, ice encased his entire body. Seeing him all frozen, Orin ordered the others to retreat while she held them back. But Kana called out to her and pleaded for them to escape together. However, she still insisted because of her promise to stop Guy from harming anyone. Moreover, her ice star wouldn't hold him for long. Knowing this, she proceeded to face the blocked entrance and unleashed her 1,000 ice pillars upon it. As a result, the obstruction completely shattered. Seeing this, Ken exclaimed that a path to the exit had been opened. Senri then ordered everyone to go to honor Orin's resolve. In response, they all agreed. Meanwhile, Orin continued to guard the strongest Eva. When the ice finally broke apart, he then questioned if she was done playing with water. Seeing her startled reaction, he said mere ice was useless and letting others escape meant nothing. That's because he intended to burn the entire planet anyway. But before that, he wanted to enjoy some entertainment. Remembering Orin's closeness to Guy, he vowed to torment her to make Guy suffer. Despite feeling frightened, Orin clenched her teeth and ordered him to approach her. She then made it clear she'd stop him even if it cost her life. With that, he recognized her good star elements. He also mentioned that they were reacting to her resolve. Intrigued, he let her entertain him and unleashed more power. A system warning then showed the strongest Eva's release rate passed 0.9% and would break the seal at 1%, which stunned Guy, because releasing the strongest Eva's body would mean humanity's end. While he's frustrated, the system begins initiating a countdown release. With that, Guy was left wondering how he could possibly stop it. Suddenly, the system asked if he wished to activate Apex Predator Reversal Mode, and this confused him. So the window explained that activating the mode would consume his body and end his existence. But this realization left him in disbelief. Meanwhile outside, Orin continued to face the strongest Eva. But she noticed that her fading ability that relied on stopping motion would be easily cancelled by stronger foes. Realizing this, she knew only a focused breakthrough would work. But doubts arose about hitting the strongest Eva. With that, memories of Guy telling her he'll do what he can come to mind. In the end, she told herself it wasn't about ability since it was something she had to do. As she focused her energy, the strongest Eva saw her condensing star elements into one point. Finding it interesting, he decided to do the same. Using his immense energy, he slowly compresses it and manages to focus it into his fist. He then raised his hand toward Orin and suggested to unleash it. Hearing this, Orin realized that her own ability would be destroyed instantly if it clashed with his, but she knew better than to risk striking his concentrated power directly. However, she still needed to figure out how to create an opening. Suddenly, a rock nearby began to shift, and from within it, Ida slowly emerged. Upon seeing Guy, he confirmed that Guy was the strongest Eva. Without hesitation, he attacked Guy's body. The strongest Eva then acknowledged his effort but dismissed him as too slow. At that moment, the humanoid also charged toward him. It declares its intent to devour him and grow stronger. However, the strongest Eva responded by calling them both pathetic. As the humanoid launched its attack, he admitted that they had at least managed to entertain him, but it did not stop Ida from attacking him. After striking him, Ida managed to cut off the strongest Eva's arm. Seeing this, Orin recognized that this was her chance, but she began to worry what would happen to Guy if she unleashed her attack. Hence, she recalled Guy's words that worth is shown through actions. Remembering this, she stepped forward and decided to do what she could. Seeing her, the strongest eagle was surprised, but Orin was determined to carry out her plan. With power concentrated in her hand, she struck him with an attack called Pluto's Star. When she saw him gasp, she realized that her attack had landed successfully. With that, the pain from the hit caused him to continue gasping. Meanwhile, his right arm in the air began to glow. As the light intensified, it suddenly exploded, which shook the entire area. Witnessing this, Ida became alarmed and realized that the explosion might cause the cave to collapse. At the same time, the strongest Eva took a moment to examine the injury near his heart. He then noted Orin had struck him and disrupted his star element flow. With that, he acknowledged the strength of her ability. Additionally, he concluded this was the power of humanity's top S rank. Still, he smirked and began to regenerate his severed arm. After fully restoring it, he said she could have stopped him a second sooner. Without hesitation, he started to grow wings and declared that it was time for release. Seeing this, Orin was completely stunned. Meanwhile, Guy stared at the apex reversal prompt that would consume his body. As the countdown progressed, he realized this choice would also erase the strongest Eva. But this brought his mind back to his mother, who was still in a coma. Suddenly, the window replayed the strongest Eva challenging Orin. Seeing Orin's determined face, he was reminded that everyone would soon vanish at this rate. At that moment, he recalled his mother telling him to be useful in his own way. Remembering this, he finally found his calm. With renewed resolve, he declared to himself that he would do what he could. With that decision made, he activated the reversal mode, and the window immediately responded to the command. At the same time, the strongest Eva began to rise into the air, catching Orin by surprise. As he hovered, he wondered if the ice in his heart delayed his true body's return. Despite that, he smiled and confidently declared that no one could stop the strongest Eva. He then declared the game's over and vowed to reclaim his form and burn the planet. But before that, he intended to eliminate the strongest of humanity, which are the S-rankers. Twistedly respectful, he vowed to erase them instantly to spare them suffering. Hearing this, Orin realized they couldn't stop him. As the strongest Eva began his farewell, something suddenly emerged from his body. He looked down and noticed a hole had formed in his chest. Following that, another one appeared. Recognizing the signs, he understood this was exactly what had happened before. In agony, he began shouting the words Apex Predator. Watching him writhe in pain, Orin was left wondering what was happening. Just then, Ida's hand moved and grabbed her, so she asked what he was doing. Calmly, he said they were retreating and offered to carry her with his ability. With that, he urged her to hold on tight as he accelerated. While they moved, he told her that this was all they could do for now. Therefore, the best move was for all 10 S rankers to unite, and she had to understand that. Hearing this, she nodded in agreement. After he set her down, she thanked him and said she'd continue alone. In response, he remarked that her face looked better now than during the selection exam. Though she looked calm, she hoped to stop Guy in time and that he could still wait. Meanwhile, inside the collapsing cave, black holes continued to emerge from Guy's body. Observing this, the strongest Eva sensed the apex predator's return just before his release. Suddenly, the holes began to stabilize and settle. Hence, he found this development intriguing. He then declared himself King of Evas and challenged Guy for the apex predator title. Facing Guy's overwhelming ability, he began regenerating his body. Once he restored himself, he continuously regenerated and turned it into a battle of stamina over star elements. Suddenly, another hole opened up. Acknowledging it, he declared it a battle to see who would vanish first with their lives at stake. As he tried to close the opening, 2 more holes formed. Despite this, he continued regenerating. Then another hole appeared in his stomach. Still, he believed he could handle it since he had once consumed this power before. Confidently, he laughed and declared this match to be his victory. However, more holes began to form across his body. Inside the sealed space, Guy faced the manifestation of the strongest Eva. With the release process halted, everything grew quiet. Still, Guy warned the strongest Eva to prepare. Immediately, a hole appeared on the chest of the strongest Eva. The wound's pain intensified, and he couldn't hold back. Despite this, he assumed Guy endured the same pain. The strongest Eva then wondered why the apex predator appeared at crucial moments. However, Guy didn't understand it himself, but he knew it meant the end for them. Hearing this, the strongest Eva first felt pain and found it unbearable. In response, Guy asked him if it's his first time. The Eva then revealed he had never faced anything that could harm him before. As another hole opened in his body, both he and Guy cried out in agony. At last, the strongest Eva gave up. He admitted he never imagined the suffering ordinary humans endured. With that, Guy recalled what he had expressed earlier. That in a battle of wills, he wouldn't back down and his pain was small against his will to protect. In response, the strongest Eva acknowledged Guy's resolve and recognized something extraordinary in him, which took Guy by surprise. Following that, Guy smiled and said it took him long enough to realize that. As the Eva smiled back, multiple holes began to form. Hence, both of them continued to be afflicted. Eventually, the system window announced reversal mode terminated. Outside the cave, rocks tumbled to the ground. Seeing this, Senri recognized the full collapse of the structure. Therefore, Kana grew anxious about Orin's safety. To his relief, she emerged from the cave. Besides her, there's also Ida. With that, Kana quickly inquired about Guy, but Hazel stressed that Guy is the strongest Eva and he was no longer human. Despite this, Kana recalled Guy supporting him in weakness and fighting bravely. Because of that, he believed that Guy could not possibly be one of the Evas. Orin revealed that Guy is human and strongest Eva, who uses his black hole power to seal the Eva that attacked their school. Upon hearing this, Hazel quickly recalled the strongest Eva from that incident. Orin then said Guy had to release the sealed entity when near defeat, but he misjudged his control. Ida then grits his teeth and assumed Guy tried to act cool. Though they failed to stop him, Ida vowed to finish him and asked about reinforcements. Ken responded that an S-rank unit led by the principal was en route. However, Senri doubted the need for reinforcements. When asked for clarification, she confirmed Guy and the strongest Eva were eliminated, likely by a variant of Guy's alpha ability. Hearing this, Orin was shocked that Guy was also eliminated. Kana then fell and grieved, while the others stood in solemn silence. Observing this, Ida urged Kana to stand and reminded them all their duty as H students was to protect humanity. Though top rankers, none had harmed an S+ Eva and allowed themselves to be saved by unranked Guy. Knowing this, Ida vowed they'd push harder to defeat even the strongest Evas. Hearing this, they all agreed. Despite their resolution, Orin could not stop thinking about Guy. Memories of their time together began to resurface, especially his belief that one's worth is determined by their actions. Holding on to that thought, she began to believe that Guy might still be alive somewhere. Meanwhile, inside a mansion, a girl in a wheelchair sat by a window. There, she questioned whether the boy who had become the strongest Eva had truly disappeared. Hence, she wondered if a future different from her precognition was unfolding. Suddenly, 5 colorful streaks of light shot through her head. Realizing that a new precognition had arrived, she struggled to believe what these 5 shooting star visions are. A year after Guy's disappearance, Evas ran rampant in District 85. Amid the chaos, a father and daughter were trapped and alarmed by an S-class Eva nearby. Though only an E rank, the father vowed to protect his daughter. Suddenly, the Eva launched an attack toward them. Just before the strike could land, a powerful ice ability activated. The shimmering Pluto's arrow shot forward and struck the Eva, which froze it completely. The father then stared in shock as the creature froze solid. Suddenly, a voice called out an apology for arriving late. Upon seeing her, the father immediately identified her as Orin, the third S-ranker. His daughter then ran toward Orin and gratefully thanked her. In response, Orin warmly embraced the girl and assured her all was under control. After that, she told the father to evacuate to a secured rear zone. After ensuring their safety, she focused on the battlefield and vowed her squad would eliminate the invading Evas. The father then thanked her deeply and hurried away with his daughter. As Orin waved them off, another Eva suddenly emerged. Facing them, she signaled her team to engage and eliminate the threats infesting the city. Hazel and Kanna then responded without delay. Kanna activated his ability first, unleashing a barrage called Black Bubble Bullet. When the Evas were struck in the eyes, they lost mobility due to the adhesion and hardening effects of his A-rank power. Following that, Hazel charged in and delivered a penetrating strike that shattered them. Impressed by this, Orin ordered the squad to keep pressing forward. Once the battle concluded, Orin opened communication with headquarters. She then reported the mission complete with no more Evas detected. In response, headquarters ordered their prompt return. After this, Kanna commented on how intense the operation had been. However, Hazel noted Kanna's power after he restrained an S-class Evo with one strike. Kanna then credited Ida's training for his growth, to which Hazel agreed they'd all endured their own hell under different S-rankers. However, Kanna admitted he was glad they grew stronger to avoid that frustration again. Hearing this, Hazel recalled Guy acting cool and carrying the burden alone. Orin also agreed that Guy always pushed himself too hard to seem cool. Still, she believed he'd return unexpectedly, so they should build a peaceful home for now. With that in mind, she ordered them to convert the neutralized Evas into element stones. Hazel then eagerly volunteered to blast them, but Kanna warned they might get caught. Meanwhile, Orin remained focused on the frozen Eva. With that, she remembered how Eva activities surged after the strongest Eva appeared, but humanity fought back. Thanks to S-rankers training, H students' alpha abilities improved greatly. Moreover, the developed Type 1 Stellas from element stones let them detect and respond to Eva star elements. With this advancement, large-scale military operations began humanity's counteroffensive. With that, she believed they had made good progress so far. However, the prophecy warned of 5 more strongest Evas this year, and she doubted their power to face them. Suddenly, an emergency channel from S-ranker Seiki surprised Hazel. They were told the District 1 liberation operation had succeeded, where a joint S-ranker team eradicated the Evas in the area. Surprised by the quick win, Hazel noted the early hour, and Kanna praised the S-ranker's efficiency. Seiki then confirmed the early completion and announced reconstruction would start soon for settlers' safe return. After all, District 1 was the safest place guarded by 5 S-rankers. After the call, the 5th S-ranker Tsuin suggested that they keep the momentum going. The 6th S-ranker Jin then voiced his deep resentment toward the Eva's destruction. Hearing this, 4th S-ranker Soka agreed and vowed to annihilate them all. The 8th S-ranker Akira then assured they could eliminate the Evas fully. Still, 2nd S-ranker Seiki warned against complacency and vowed to fight until all Evas were wiped out, to which they all agreed. Meanwhile, Orin felt uneasy despite things going well. At the 8th Memorial, top S-ranker Ida paid a solemn visit. There he gathered his fellow H students and told them to listen carefully. He marked 1 year since the strongest Eva attacked their school and killed 58 students. As they listened, he added that it was Guy who sealed the strongest Eva. He explained Guy released the Eva King to protect them, but vanished with it to stop its rampage. Knowing this, he urged them to protect humanity for Guy and the 58 lost lives. As they observed a moment of silence, Jin began to shed tears. Meanwhile, Orin continued to believe that Guy was still alive. Just like her, Kanna and Hazel also thought about him. After silence, Ida said they'd trained to defeat A-class Evas and reclaim land. But S-ranker Banri's prophecy warned them that 5 strongest Evas would appear this year. Because of this, they needed to train even harder. From now on, all S-rankers would train Headshi students to fight upcoming threats together. Hearing this, the students responded with an enthusiastic shout. Meanwhile, someone approached a student and asked about the event. The student turned and was shocked to see the speaker. It was Guy, the one they all believed to be dead. Hearing this, Orin ran toward him and hugged him tightly. While he's shocked, Orin expressed her joy in seeing him alive. In response, he said he was glad they survived and thanked her for saving him. However, she activated her power to scold him for recklessness, and Guy quickly apologized. Meanwhile, Senri and Kanna were also excited to see him again. But beside them, Guy also saw the other selected members were alive. Senri then asked if it was really him since he looked more muscular, and Guy said he just noticed too. At the same time, Ida and the others began to notice them. Suddenly, Senri asked Guy what really happened since she saw him disappear. Suddenly, the spirit called Guy to do something more meaningful than just standing around. Hearing this, Orin asked him what the strange creature beside him was. Surprised, Guy asked if she could actually see the spirit. Senri was also shocked and asked why the strongest Eva had a physical form. Hearing this, Ida immediately appeared in front of Guy. Soka also followed and threatened to kill the strongest Eva. Soon after, the other S-rankers quickly surrounded them. Seeing the situation unfold, Senri realized she had made a mistake. Ida then warned Guy not to move or he would cut off his head. He then asked if he was truly Guy and why he was with the talking Eva. With that being said, he warned that the S-rankers might have to eliminate him and the Eva depending on his answer. But this made Orin deeply concerned. Meanwhile, Guy had no idea it's been a year since he just regained consciousness 3 days ago. He said that he and the strongest Eva had collapsed inside a cave. Moreover, he never thought people would be able to see him now. He added that he went home once before heading to Hashe. Meanwhile, Senri carefully observed him. She then told Ida her celestial sense confirmed he was Guy. However, his star element level was 0. The Eva with him also had a 0 star element, making them both unranked. Upon hearing this, Ida finally stood down. However, Seiki remained on alert. Suddenly, Akira reminded everyone that rank did not determine everything. He noted the strongest Eva had killed H students and tried to wipe out their team in the humanoid battle. Although no one died, Ryo resigned as principal for hiding its existence, and though Guy survived as a hero, the threat remained. So he questioned if the strongest Eva lost control again, they might have to eliminate it along with Guy. Upon looking at Akira, Guy noticed that he was also an S-ranker. In response, he remarked that killing him sounded interesting, so he challenged the S-rankers to try if they believed they could. Hearing this, Orin sensed that Guy's aura had changed. She recognized the overwhelming presence the same as the strongest Eva. However, Guy snapped out of it and wondered if he'd just spoken boldly. He then immediately asked everyone to forget what he said. Still, he noticed they continued to suspect him, so he clarified that he was human. As proof, he showed them his hand. Surprised, Orin saw the black hole vanish from his right hand, and his aura returned to normal. Guy explained the black hole ability sealing the strongest Eva was gone, so he's now ordinary. However, he confirmed that the spirit beside him was indeed the strongest Eva, but it was no longer dangerous. In response, Ida asked him to show proof of this claim. Guy admitted lacking solid evidence, but remained certain deep down. Recalling Eva's words about being unique, Guy declared he is now safe. Hearing this, the spirit blushed. Suddenly, someone activated their ability, which shocked the students. Akira shouted that his explanation made no sense and vowed to dispose of him immediately. Ida tried to stop him, but he argued that with the 5 strongest Evas arriving, they couldn't risk a potential threat in their ranks. As Guy tried to explain, he had already vanished. Surprisingly, he reappeared in front of Guy to strike him. Reacting quickly, Guy dodged the attack, along with Ida and the spirit. Seeing this, Orin yelled for him to run or he would be killed. Meanwhile, the others were stunned that Guy evaded the fast and most agile electric user Akira, but Guy himself hadn't expected to move like that. Akira then ordered him not to move, but he pleaded with him to listen first. Despite everything, he dodged again, which left him to question himself. Aside from that, he noticed that Akira's movements seemed slow. Because of this, he continued to dodge his attacks. Seeing this, the others found it fascinating because Akira's electric scalpel sharp hand chops would have killed them instantly. Meanwhile, Akira began launching thunder shocks to kill Guy. However, he dodged easily and clearly sensed the electric attacks flow. Orin was also amazed he dodged an S-ranker's full assault. As she looked at him, he wondered how the powerless could move like that. At the same time, the spirit had already figured it out. On the other hand, Guy found it strange that the danger didn't feel threatening. Watching Akira attack him out of frustration, he even thought it was kind of fun. With that, he reached out and grabbed his hand. With that, he confirmed the electricity flowed from his wrist down, but Akira demanded he let go. So in response, he calmly told her to stop struggling. As he held him, he declared that he had no intention of fighting. Surprised, Akira suddenly saw a pair of eyes. Following that, the full form of the strongest Eva appeared before him. In response, he fell to his knees in shock. Seeing this, Guy immediately asked what was wrong, but the others were also confused since all they saw was him holding Akira's arm. Suddenly, the spirit told Guy he had suspected it, and now knew for sure. He revealed that their bodies and souls had become intertwined. He explained their souls partially resided in each other's bodies. Still confused, Guy asked what that meant. The spirit then revealed that Guy was now essentially a strongest Eva himself. Shocked by this, Guy said he no longer needed their trust since he was now a target. Upon hearing this, Seiki ordered Guy to stay still so he could restrain him. While Guy was caught in a tense situation, a voice suddenly ordered them to stop. In response, Seiki asked who it was and noted they were in the middle of an important survival discussion. But when he saw who it was, he was surprised. It was Banri, the Foreseer. Banri calmly said Guy was not an enemy and urged them to stop fighting. However, Guy didn't know her, so Senri explained she was the S-ranker Banri. Additionally, she is her twin sister. But Guy was surprised to learn that Senri had a sister. Senri explained she saw the present in humans and Evas using star elements, while Banri saw the future through them. After Banri foresaw the strongest Eva's arrival, they became the Twins of Fate and the nation's key figures. However, Banri's precognition was fragmentary, so she could not foresee the second strongest Eva whom Guy had devoured. In addition, even the prediction of the 5 strongest Evas was vague, but she just had a new vision. Hearing this, Suin and Jin were both surprised. Banri revealed the vision showed someone like Guy fighting the strongest Eva. Hearing this revelation, Ida was speechless. Nevertheless, Banri said that their twin abilities were fully activated and combined when Senri saw Guy. Still, Banri acknowledged concerns that Guy might be the strongest Eva. However, she explained a human Eva being might be key to defeating the strongest Eva. At that moment, Guy raised his hand. He then asked her what the strongest Eva was and how it differed from other Evas. In response, Banri said they needed to start by explaining the ranking system. Humans rank Evas by strength, with each ranker able to defeat an Eva of the same rank. However, S+ class Evas require multiple S rankers to take down. While the strongest Eva are so extraordinary that even all high rankers combined may not defeat them. Hearing this, the spirit felt satisfied with her understanding. Banri then said that 10 years ago, all but Rio of the 9 S-rankers died or retired after the first strongest Eva attack. Additionally, over 100 lower rankers died, which showed one strongest Eva almost wiped out humanity. Because of this, Banri believed a human strongest Eva being was vital for survival and humanity needed Guy. Suddenly, Jin noticed a special alert flashing on his device. At the same time, a meteorite streaked across the sky and struck nearby buildings. In District 132, a defense squad had been stationed close. Upon witnessing this, the squad captain Yoshino questioned whether this might be an Eva attack. Without warning, their watches alerted high star elements and they were ordered to evacuate. Shortly afterward, an Eva appeared. Yoshino identified it as a dragon type and wondered if it was one of the strongest Evas. Unexpectedly, the creature lunged forward and devoured him instantly. The remaining squad stared in shock and called for their captain. Nevertheless, they confirmed it was the strongest Eva and began an emergency evacuation. Suddenly, a strange sound echoed through the area. Looking at the Eva, the squad noticed its back beginning to glow. As the light intensified, a figure emerged from the top of the creature. It was an unclothed man attempting to speak, but his voice sounded strained and unfamiliar. Seeing him, they recognized the figure as Yoshino. Meanwhile, Yoshino was all focused on adjusting to his new body and voice. Upon examining himself, he noted the body was the planet's native species he recreated from the human's DNA. Hearing this, the man below was speechless. Upon seeing the man, Yoshino declared his arrival and interest in exploring his abilities on the new planet. Moving at incredible speed, he suddenly appeared beside the man to do native species hunting. Holding the man's head, Yoshino's goal was to find the 2 missing strongest Evas and start large-scale hunting of humans. With that, he believed devouring the last 2 strongest Evas would make him king of the universe.